I'd like to call tonight's meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee to order. Mr. Seychuk, can we have a roll call to establish quorum?
Yes, on the roll call to establish quorum, Director Berry is absent. Director Bruhard,
Here.
Chairperson Lada.
Present.
Quorum present.
And did we receive any requests for interpretation tonight, Mr. Seychuk?
No request, Chair.
Okay, so we'll proceed without interpretation. So welcome to the June 4th, 2026 meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. There will be time for public comment on each item discussed. So please sign up to speak at the card by the front desk, or you can sign up online and choose sign in to speak or use the online e-comment feature. Next, we'll move on to adoption of committee minutes. We have the minutes of the May 14th, 2026 Budget and Finance Committee. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Roll call.
Roll call on the vote. Yes, please.
And for the record, we have no public speak for this current item. On the motion to adopt the minutes as stated by Chair, Director Berry is absent. Director Bruhard,
Yes.
Chairperson Lada.
Yes.
The motion is adopted.
Okay, and next, we have nothing under the general consent report, and we have no unfinished business. So we'll move on next to new business. First up is item G1, 26-1466A, Budget and Finance Committee 2026-2027 fiscal year district budget all funds. I will turn it over to our Deputy Superintendent of Business and Operations, Ms. Tara Gard. We also have Ryan Nguyen, our Chief Financial Officer, online.
Good evening, Budget and Finance Committee and community. Here to go back over our draft budget for the 26-27 school year next year. And I have, before I speak, I have, as Director Lada mentioned, Ryan Nguyen, our Chief Financial Officer, is on as well. And so annually, the district is required to bring forward a draft budget, and that is done under Education Code 42127. And in that draft budget, we talk about where we think we are headed at the end of this year, where it's looking. We're really very close, and we'll bring an adopted budget on the 24th. And then part of this, well, another reason for this has to do with the LCAP as well. But what I wanted to talk about here is what we do for reconciliation for our budget. And that includes 6 elements really that we're really look at as we're going through the budget. One of them is that all of the school sites and departments receive their budgets, and the HR team, strategic resource and planning, and the budget office all work with them. It's called one-pagers that they get, but then there's meetings that happen. And then after that, we do a lot of reconciliation to make sure that what occurred in those meetings is actually in our system, so that we can properly budget at the end of the year for the next year. We update the LCFF revenue, and I've mentioned here that we did get a May revise from the governor, and we did budget some of the May revise, but we were very conservative around that, and I'll talk about that more. And then we have position control, which is very important. There was a time where the district actually did not have position control, so every position in the district has its own unique number tied to it, and that's how and then behind the number is the funding source. So we're making sure that all of the positions that should be in the budget are in the budget based on those numbers, and that the accounting codes behind it the resources that are used to spend it into the next year are properly updated. We did reconcile, so the OEA tentative agreement and SEIU agreement is already embedded in the 26-27 budget. The OEA agreement will come to the board no later than the 24th of June. And then another part of our reconciliation process is the encumbrances and contributions that go into the general fund, and just making sure that we have that all clean, and that we've taken care of everything before we close out this budget into the next year. Okay, so right here, I want to go through, and I'm going to just look so I don't miss anything, go through the summary of our budget. So you're looking at the draft summary. And the first thing is revenues. And revenues are all the money flowing into the district from 4 resources, the state through LCFF, and that's approximately $500 million. And then federal grants at about $54 million, other state categorical programs like special education, lottery, expanded learning, arts and music at $189 million, and local sources, including parcel taxes, interest, and facility rentals at $93 million. So our unrestricted revenues total $528 million, you can see on the top. And then our restricted revenues are $310 million. As far as expenditures, which is, you think about it as all the money that's flowing out of the district, unrestricted expenditures are at $370 million. And then unrestricted expenditures is $370 million, and our restricted expenditures $506.8 million. Combined, our expenditures are at $877 million. And then if you're following along on the summary page, we have excess of deficiency. And the unrestricted side shows revenues exceeding expenditures by $157 million. And this is where sometimes people look at it and say, well, your unrestricted is in a good space because you have revenues exceeding expenditures. But that is not the case, because then if you look over, what happens is that the unrestricted side is there's a contribution to the restricted programs, because the restricted programs are overspent each year. So we cover that through the unrestricted. And that's driven primarily by special education cost. It's currently at $145.8 million over. And then self-insurance at $3 million and deferred maintenance at $1 million. So the unrestricted contribution covers that gap. And then the contribution mechanism, the unrestricted fund contributes, and I mentioned this already, $146 million to restricted programs. After that contribution, the unrestricted net change is a positive 7.2, about 7.2 if you're rounding. And you can see that net increase in fund balance is net increase or decrease. For the restricted side, you'll see for the restricted net change is a negative $49.7 million, a planned spend down of carryover balances the board authorized as a budget balancing solution. Combined net change is negative $42.5 million. And then for the fund balance, which is the beginning balance in 26-27 is $153.8 million, $29.6 million unrestricted, and $124.1 million restricted. Projected ending balance is $111.2 million, $74.4 million in restricted reserves, and $29.6 million in the reserve for economic uncertainty, which meets the 2% And then we have another 7 million unassigned to get us to that 3. 2 points before I move on here. The growing, and this is not a negative on special education. This is actually a state problem that we have to work through. But the growing special education contribution is the dominant driver for the contribution that we need to make to the restricted side. And that is why in the financial stabilization plan, which we'll talk about later, we were seeking to address the contribution to special education. And that's not to, it says a decrease, but it's really how we manage it more than a decrease. So, because each year it's growing. So just how we can manage that. And if not manage it, then prepare for it better. And the 49.7 million restricted drawdown is not a crisis. It is authorized spend down of accumulated restricted balances documented in the budget balancing solutions. Okay. Here is a comparison of our third interim to the draft budget. This slide is one that I want to spend the most time on. It directly addresses some of the questions that have come up about our expenditures particularly. So if you read the table, the left column show the 25-26 third interim estimated actuals, what we project to spend and receive in the current year that is ending June 30th, 2026. And then the right columns show the 26-27 draft budget. The percentage difference column on the far right compares the total fund columns, compares those two total fund columns. So the first thing we'll talk about again is revenues. You can see the total revenues decline from 869 million in 25-26 to 838 million in 26-27. It's a reduction of about 31 million or 3.6%. That's what we're looking at now. And for everyone to understand, the primary drivers is the federal revenue declining from 77 million to 54, about a 30% reduction. And this reflects the expiration of one-time federal grants that were never intended to be permanent, or federal grants that we have not received but we can't put it in because until we are confident that we're going to have it. And then in other cases, grants that we're getting, but it seems as though right now we're getting less dollars. And so I'll name a few. That's Title I, there's a 2 million decrease. ESSA, a 1.8 million decline. CSI, 1.9 million. You have 21st Century down by 5 million. Then EPA down by 13 million. That's just some examples. Sure. Title I, 2 million. ESSA, 1.8. CSI, 1.9. 21st Century, 5 million. EPA, 13 million. And also I recall at the board meeting last night, one of the board directors asked for a list, so we'll prepare a list and provide it and put it up on our website too so people can see it. Moving on to other local revenue, which has also declined from 111 million to 90 million because of local state grants. And what we're seeing is down right now is 3.2 million for literacy state grant, and we'll also provide a list of this. We see 2.5 million down for CCSPP grant, and then the learning emergency down by 2.5 million. And then there's some other grants, like for example, we had educator effectiveness for a few years now, and that's gone. So this is why our revenue is being projected as declining. However, LCFF revenue has increased from 491 million to 504 million, a 2.7% increase reflecting primarily the May revise COLA. And what I mentioned before is we are following the recommendation from school services and the county. And in our projections, we used 2.87%. We did not use the super COLA for 26-27. For 27-28, we did 3.3%. The super COLA is 4.31%. Districts are not totally expecting 4.31% because there's other offsetting issues around that. So we'll see, but close to 4. If we're expecting to get at least 4, but maybe not that 3.1. We also did not include the differential for special education. And for the discretionary block grant, we booked $750 for ADA instead of $900 to be conservative. So there could be still, and we're hoping for, an upside once the May revise is final. And then we'll adjust. Going back down to expenditures, total expenditures decline from $973.3 million to $877.1 million in 2026-27, a reduction of approximately $96 million or 9.9%. And this is the number that generated a lot of attention from the public. So I'd like to explain that here, and I explained it last night at the board meeting. On the unrestricted side, expenditures declined from $406 million to $370 million, a reduction of approximately $36 million. The year-over-year reduction reflects two things working together. First, the RIF, or the reduction in force, and the PARS early retirement incentives take full effect in 26-27 as those positions go unfilled. The layoff notices issued March 15th, 2026, affecting approximately 716 positions, and that's not to say we've eliminated 716 positions, because we have not, but we have eliminated and reduced many positions. And we'll get the exact number as we match it to the next budget. And the 160 plus retirements through PARS. And we want to be careful for people not to double count, because some of the people retiring are also eliminations of positions. So we'll provide a clearer number when we do our budget adoption. These employees were paid through June 30th, 2026. So in 26-27, those positions are gone. You can see the result directly in the certificated salary line. So if you're looking across, you'll see for certificated salaries, it's $192 million this year, and next year we're projecting it at $183 million. And for classified salaries, it's $73 million, and we're projecting it at $63 million. So you can see there's clear reductions in our staff. The second reason why our expenditures are down is the funding source realignment and reclassification of expenses. As we discussed previously, that includes medical billing, some parcel tax, which was part of attachment C, attendance specialist, which we moved to S&C, small schools, which are moved over and put in the LCAP. So that move was approximately $37 million in reoccurring annual cost from the unrestricted general fund to restricted sources and continues into 26-27. Some of the other areas that we're looking at is some costs from facilities that went into the general fund that shouldn't have, and then some costs in nutrition services that we're looking at as well. Everything that we are doing is compliant. We talked to our auditor, we've talked to outside counsel, we talked to the program teams, and we're going through it. We believe everything is compliant, and we're not just sitting back and shifting around funds at all. We're only looking at what has been expended. Did the general fund pay for it where there is carryover or plenty of funding in other sources, that it would be allowable, and it probably should have started there. And then the other part of this, for the community to know, is that as we move into the following year, next year, we need to be ahead of that. So instead of us reclassifying, we're going to be looking at closely what is being expended out of the general fund, so we get ahead of it instead of cleaning it up after. On the restricted side, expenditures declined from 567 to 506 million, a reduction of approximately 60 million. The majority of the restricted funding sources must balance to zero by law. When grant revenues do not recur, as with expiring federal and local programs, the budgeted expenditures also disappears from both sides simultaneously. This is not a service cut. It is a natural conclusion of time-limited grants. The restricted side always shows expenditures exceeding revenues because it draws on prior carryover balances. Restricted programs accumulate unspent balances when grants arrive before expenditures are incurred. The board directed the district to spend those carryovers for their intended purposes rather than leave them idle. The restricted ending balance of 74.4 million represents the remaining carryover that will be spent in the future years. This is not a deficit in the solvency sense. It is a multi-year spend down of money already in the bank of OUSD. Now, I'd also like to address the comparison that has been cited publicly, which is how does the 26-27 draft budget compare to what was projected for 26-27 at first interim last December? At first interim, 26-27 multi-year projection showed unrestricted expenditures at approximately 470 million. The draft budget shows 370 million. That appears to be a $100 million difference. Here is the explanation. The 470 million first interim figure includes a 103 million line item that was not a real expenditure category. It was a budget balancing placeholder. A reverse engineered line that said, in order for revenues to cover expenditures under our current assumptions, so the assumptions at that time, we will need to find 103 million in additional cuts, and we have not found them yet at that time. That placeholder was a disclosure of a projected gap. When the strategies were implemented through the approved Financial Stabilization Implementation Plan, reductions in expenditures, funding source realignments, workforce reductions, restricted carryover utilization, that placeholder is now unnecessary except for 30 million that we are still projecting into next year as a deficit. So in other words, there was a projection at first interim that we had a $100 million deficit. The board worked with staff to implement a plan, and we've executed on that plan. We also are benefiting from the May revise, which has helped our budget and has helped our positioning, and is why we certified our third interim as positive, because we are confident that we can continue to work together. We've done a lot of hard work. The board has done a lot of hard work, so has the staff, and we can continue that work together to meet the projected deficit of 30 million in the next year. And again, that deficit may change if we move off of some of the conservative numbers for our May revise. But even if it does change, we still need, we don't want this district to live check to check. So even if it does get better, we still need to probably make the reductions that we're talking about. And then for the fund balance, which is the last piece I'll talk about, the adjusted beginning balance in 26-27 is 153.7 million. The projected ending balance is 111. The ending balance decreased from the beginning balance primarily because the restricted carryover is being drawn down. Just already mentioned that. So the unrestricted ending balance grows from 29.6 million in third interim to 36.7. That's how we're projecting it to be. So the unrestricted position is improving. Sorry. Last things, we just got through with our going through the budget comparison. And this is just to talk about the LCAP, which there was a presentation on the LCAP that in yesterday's board meeting ahead of the budget. And so the LCAP and the budget drafts are forward and will come back to you again on June 24th. There's for the LCAP, they'll be also putting up on their website June 21st and providing more information, my understanding, to PSAC. And then we'll be back on the 24th with our proposal for the adopted budget. This actually says the same, pretty much same information, which is anticipating the adopted budget coming up on the 24th. That's it. I wanted to say it 3 times to make sure everybody could remember. June 24th is where it comes. Okay, I'll stop there.
All right, we'll do board questions, comments. President Brohard.
And I have Ryan on for.
Yes, we have Ryan.
Is that already included in this?
We did not include
Okay.
the special ed differential. No.
Okay.
So that should help some.
My other question comes up around, and this came up last night, around the deficit. And I just want to double check something, because I think in the past, we've used our fund balance, to adjust for that. And I think that got us into trouble with the, emergency, the fund, we had to keep the reserves. So is that?
We're not planning that.
Okay. And then my last question. Oh, could you explain the placeholder thing again? Because I know this was always a big thing before with, I hate to say the books and supplies placeholder, but can you explain how that placeholder works in?
Yeah, maybe I'll have, Ryan, are you on? Can you talk through the placeholder?
The placeholder. So as we were budgeting for first interim, we looked at our total revenue, our total expenses, contributions, and uses, and what we project out what the effect of those transaction will be by year end. If everything went according to what is budgeted at first interim, there would be about $100 million some odd deficit. This assumes that at the time there were projections for contracts, for various other capital expenditure and such. And so, based on the information at the time, there was about $100 million in deficit. So, in order to pass the budget for the county and the state, we have to show that we are moving towards a balanced budget, and a way to clearly show it as a line item is to show it on line B11, I believe, on the MYP. And in there, if we either increase our revenue or decrease our expenditure, the net effect is we have to come up with $100 million in order to balance. Since first interim, the board authorized staff to implement various budget balancing solution, shifting compliance costs out to other restricted resources and funds, and also reducing expenditure. So we reduced expenditure for both labor and non-labor, things like salary. Then there's supplies and consulting costs. And so all that work through second interim, third interim has us currently projecting year-end close for unaudited actual to close with about $29-30 million of fund balance. And is that and I'll leave it there. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And then my last question, and this keeps coming up, is the comment that this isn't a balanced budget. So if you could address that, I know that came up repeatedly last night. What are we doing to move towards getting rid? Do we need to eliminate the 39,000, whatever, 30
The 30 million?
Yeah. So do we see eliminating that? Do we see going into the fund balances to eliminate that? How do we see addressing that deficit, I guess?
We should bring on the 24th when we're adopting the budget. We need to talk about the stabilization plan that we have, and that we're continuing that work and how we're going to meet that 30 million. Right, but you can still close your budget with a deficit. I want for someone to show me how many districts are not. But what we need to do is look back at the work, and we're going to talk about that after here, that we've been doing, and then what we're going to continue to do to close that 30 million right when we're starting that next year.
And I'd like to add, as well as we close, as we project, we're using with the best available data as of right now. So expenditure are what it is. And of course, with the board's directive, staff will continue to reduce our expenditure. But there are also pending revenue that are coming in. Of course, we can't fully book those revenue. We're trying to be as conservative as possible, but there are revenue streams that we have not yet recorded to our budget. So that would help towards lowering the amount of budget balancing solutions that is needed for 26, 27 and the out years. So.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions. The first question is around the contribution, and I think I appreciate you trying to be mindful of the fact that we don't want to talk about the contribution as kind of the services that we provide to disabled students being right. The cause of our deficit. It's just again, it's because it's in a separate category, we see it differently than other places. There was two things about the contribution that I was wondering about, and feel free to defer these to the next item if we're going to get into it. But the first was that I noticed that in the out years, the contribution goes down by about 11%, and I wasn't sure if that was a result of the kind of the spending restricted dollars first, or anticipated savings from the non-public school, or I think that was a little bit like, oh, it does look like it's kind of going down. And again, I know there's other there's transportation in there. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is, and probably this kind of lives in how we project more accurately the special education costs, because, for example, last year we had a pretty significant, I think it was $10 million increase in the what we needed to contribute to special education because of some settled labor contracts with our contracted, like our non-public agencies. And so I wonder, kind of and again, I think I'm sort of talking myself into maybe that part we should save for the next place. But yeah, so I guess the first question is around the contribution, kind of how that, what are the assumptions underlying that in the MYP? The second thing was just, again, to confirm that the details on the reduction in force, the PARs, and the layoffs will come with the adopted budget.
Yes.
Can you also maybe just clarify when we will know what the savings are for 26, 27 of the PARs? So is that with unaudited actuals or first interim, for example? Because, right, I know that there's a whole reconciliation for the positions, but then if the idea is we're making a decision about what not to fill over and above the positions we've already eliminated, how we then reconcile those savings into our budget.
I would be more comfortable giving the number at first interim, because we tend to try to bring things back, and so it'll give the leadway. And I want to also give Ryan, because it's his team too that's going to be working through that, to, if Ryan, if you disagree, you can with me, it's okay. But I would say first interim. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, so for the PARs, it's definitely going to be around first interim, second interim. We'll know more. Whilst staff have retired, there are costs associated with the retirement plan, and then just because the positions is vacant doesn't mean we realize those savings. We will realize those savings if we don't hire, and so then there's this vacancy factor savings that our accounting team will go through and calculate to see how much we've saved from the beginning of the year through first interim, through second interim, and through third interim. And then we'll be able to see clearly, oh, these are the actual savings. Yeah.
Because not every position in PARS was eliminated, right? Because
Yeah.
there was teachers, but we'll have to, that's what he's talking about as far as getting the calculation.
And then just the, do you want to save the contribution question for the whole both questions about the reductions and for the next item?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think those were, yeah. And that, because I have a few questions on the next item, but I think let's move on to public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, we have Carol Delton.
Okay.
How many minutes would you like to allocate?
Let's do 3 minutes.
3 minutes, noted.
Good evening, everyone. So I just first of all want to say that anything that I say that's critical or something's missing or something that I would like to see does not take away from what I think has been the amazing work since mid-December till now. And I recognize that you need to prioritize, and getting the numbers right is definitely more important than necessarily getting all of the paperwork right. But now we need to get the paperwork right. So first question is, on June 24th, can we expect to see the full COLA special ed increase and block grant as it is enacted by the state legislature? Because that will definitely give an upside. And I'm assuming, but I'd love to hear it confirmed, that even if those things come back at that point, there won't be further, there won't be additional expenditures projected at that point, that you're looking to stay within the expenditures outlined in the draft budget. So second of all, I think that there are 3 pages that are missing from the presentation. You did talk about them. You gave a good narrative, Ms. Gard, but especially as time rolls on next year, I always talk about a variance report. And as a member of the contracting task force, when we know that the district is overspending its contracts every year for the past few years, I think it's important to lift up is spending in line with what was projected? Is it going over? Why is it going over? Does it need to go over? Maybe there's something can be done at first interim, second interim, um, so that something can be done without it becoming a crisis. Second page that I'd like to see, and maybe variance needs to come back more often than the interims to the board, so the board isn't surprised at the end. An assumptions page, what is the projected COLA, what's the projected attendance, various things, and also what might be expected at the next one, and then finally all funds balance, so that we can see. And what I would like to do as a member of the public is be able to look at all of these, pull out this page from first interim, second interim, how's it changing? So that, and hopefully no third interim next year. But to be able to track it more easily with the visual. And I think that would cut down on the skepticism from the public as well.
Okay. Any additional board comments, Mr. Brohard? Okay. All right, then we will move on to the next item in the agenda, which is item G2, 26-1505, Budget and Finance Committee, the Financial Stabilization Implementation Plan 2025-26. This is also a presentation by Ms. Gard.
I believe I have slides. Let me see. Right? I don't
Yeah, I
have
think there's
slides.
just the two
No.
attachments.
Yes,
So I don't know if you
two
wanted to
attachments.
if you wanted to display either of them.
Yes, two attachments. Okay. So I think what I'd like to start off by saying is that when there has been a lot of change this year, as we all know, and I appreciate that the board directed staff to come up with a plan to address the deficit. And I recognize that we haven't done really well with articulating what that plan is. And, being faced with 100 million to figure out in a year, sometimes you get your head down in trying to get it done and not figuring out the communication as well. So I want to recognize that. So what we have as an attachment, and anyone online can see as well, is the plan that we've been working through with just more detail. And the other attachment is something that I shared with the board. I can't remember when, but we were talking about plans. And if you look back in time, we've had a lot of plans. And even if you look at other districts and you look at what are their plans, you oftentimes see the same things. But we have a lot of plans. We've approved a lot of plans. And then staff is supposed to go and implement the plan and make it happen. And the board has asked, have you, what happened to all those other plans, and what have you done, right? And yes, there were some things that were approved and then reversed. That happened. And also we have to be accountable as staff to, there were some actions that we were supposed to implement, and it's looking like either we didn't finish them or we may have reversed some things on our own. Different things could have occurred. And so the other attachment is, as part of our financial stabilization plan, we named certain actions, and I'll talk about that. But then also as part of it is looking back at all of what has been approved and then seeing, hey, did we Did we follow through fully? Or is there an opportunity to look back at that and address it now because we still need to continue with reductions? So, what I first want to do is start with, I'll just go through some of the actions in the financial stabilization implementation plan. And the first being the 10% reduction of contribution to special education. And this, I believe, also I can answer, and you'll probably have to help me remind me of the question. So when we came out with this plan, what it states, it says a 10% reduction of contribution to special education. Probably wasn't the best wording, because it's not to take money away from special education, but if you look at in this write-up of the plan, and I'm going to go back and forth a little bit, so follow me. If you look at the previous plans that we've had, the fiscal vitality plan, it's all written here, sorry, but the fiscal vitality plan, attachment B and attachment C, it was named there that we, as a district, need to look at. There was a concern around the rate of the contribution into special ed, and that we need to either do an audit, look at why, so that we're properly either budgeted for it, or if there's opportunity somewhere to manage it, so that in the coming years we're not finding out in the end that we have to contribute a lot more. So we mentioned last year it was 10 million. This year, I believe we're looking at another 5. Ryan, is that correct?
Yeah. Mhm.
And finding that at the end, right? So, and then part of this could be looking at the contracting work. So it's all, it's important to me that we don't represent it as we want to take anything away from our disabled students and families, because that is not it. But we do have to operate under a budget. And if it's going to increase, then we need to understand why it's increasing and put either some preparation for it, and also look at like what is the staffing models, making sure it's all synced as it should be. And so I put this, we have not started really this work. The other reason we didn't start it yet is because we want to also make sure we're working with CAC and the program, and this will take time. And we, we want to bring in, I hate the word auditor sometimes, but bring in a third party that can help us look at the program, but look at it together, so we can get to either an understanding that, yes, it's going to increase every year at 10 million. So be prepared out of general fund to provide 10 million to special ed every year, because over whatever they're getting. Then we can budget for that. And then we need to cut more for that, right? Or it's, the staffing model needs to change or should, and we all work through it together. It's going to take a together mindset to do it. So that's the first one. Did I answer the question that you had, Director Lotta?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's the kind of framework and criteria by which we're thinking about having some more predictability makes sense. I think my question was, when I look at the MYP in the budget, it looks like the contribution is going down. And then again, it's not to say that the budget for special education has gone down, just that our contribution out of the general fund has gone down. And so my question is that I mean, it sounds like not related to this work, because we're currently not projecting, right, to decrease, obviously, and again, we've all talked about maintenance of effort, but so I guess I'm curious what the assumption is underlying that our contribution would go down. And maybe,
Yes.
Ryan, okay, thanks, Ryan.
So yes, some of the assumptions that we did, as you know, as you may know, as expenditures go down, are required. Some of the state mandated, some of the locally mandated, and so some of the locally needed budgets do go down. So, for example, for state mandated, we're required to fund 3% of routine maintenance. So if our total expenditure and total uses go down, then part of that expenditure also goes down. And then the board implemented a reduction of contribution for major maintenance, Fund 14. And so we reduced it from 3 million to 1 million. And in the future, if finances are better, we can bring it back to the funding level where needed. And then another example would be our self-insurance. So we self-insurance up to a certain dollar amount before insurance kicks in. And our projection right now is to fund that self-insurance almost like on a just-in-time basis, so that we don't have dollars sitting in Fund 67 waiting for expenditures to come. And in the future, we'll be projecting the expenditure in Fund 67 even more carefully, and we're going to be looking at how we can do this through the payroll system, adjusting the contribution rate to Fund 67 in that way. Yeah. I hope that answers. I had three examples, but yeah, we can provide more. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful, and I think also just helpful for people to, I think we talk so much about the contribution being primarily for special education, but and I can't remember which budget series it was that kind of showed the funnel, but I think thank you for just going into some of those examples, and I'll hand it back to you.
So the next strategy we had on the plan is the NPS. And we have our general counsel here. I'm not sure if, Janine, you would be okay with providing an update there.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. So unfortunately, our timelines for having our materials to BNF did not line up with kind of our response process and finalization of the NPS. So I can provide a verbal update, but the materials won't reflect that. So we did have the opportunity to go through the RFP process and interview 2 vendors. And really currently in the last stage and considering awards. And one vendor has reported their availability to open at NPS on one of our campus. This is all subject to board approval and negotiations starting this August. And the other would be the following August. And we think there may be an opportunity to partner with both. So we'll stay tuned and continue to provide information here in BNF and at the final board meeting. And of course, any facilities use agreements that are contemplated would be approved in public open session if that is what the board desires for us to move forward with.
I'm going to keep going, or is that how we want to work through it? Keep going, or pause for questions? Okay. Another strategy was the second tier contract review. And what this was about is we said that we were going to review every contract and expense that came through that was over $25,000. And that was the thinking at the time was we were going to be able to slow down the spending by reviewing and then, stopping. But, and I will say that a lot of it was difficult to stop because by the time we started doing this work, it was towards graduation and the end of the school year. So a lot of what we were seeing had to do with that. And then the other funds that were or spending that was coming through would be in grants that people were trying to spend down, or facilities and projects. So I would say the positive that came out of this is that there's a lot, and you already know through the contracting out committee or task force. So I don't have to tell anything that most people don't know, but there is a lot of spending contracts, a lot we can do, and it's a lot of work. And centrally, quite frankly, there's not. I think we need to look at how we're set up to really get at this work. I'm not suggesting we hire 1,000 people at all, but so we're going to come out the start of the year with have to have a stronger, clear process about this. We are working on, and we said this before, and actually I need to find out from the task force if you may already have it, but all of our contractors, and if they have 15 contracts everywhere, like who they are, because I think we've said this, and this again, you can see we've been talking about contracts in all of our plans since 2018, all the way down to 2025 now. And a lot of it just wasn't completed. So this is the time to do it. We have to. And so there's a lot of actions that we have. I'm glad to be able to be in this position that I'm in now, to work with the procurement team. They're a great group of people, and there's 4. And Rosa, who leads the procurement office along with Kim Rainey, are wonderful, and they've talked to me about the challenges that they're having as well. So it's going to start with pushing on the accountability, pushing on what rules there are and how we're actually checking those rules, and then looking in our system and how the flags are working. And unfortunately, as many of you may know, that Max passed away for our contracts online system. And, that's been hard on many of us. I worked with Max for a long time. But we also need to, look at that system and how we're running some contracts through the online system, some work through the legal office, and then also what's happening at the Ed Fund. I will continue to mention that because that is another issue that we have to work through, and it is going to take more work. And so I don't want to report that we did great in this area. We did look at the contracts that were coming through, but a lot of it we still allowed to go through. Let's be, honest about it. But to me, that's like one of the number one things that we have to get control over for this next budget.
Can I jump in and ask one question? Yes. And I should say, feel free to do this. Yeah. Is just around the ratcheting down of the expenditures in the 5,000s in the out years. Is that in anticipation of having more tightening up the controls on contracts? Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's part of it. Yes. Yes. We have. Yes. It has to be.
I've been
get on if you want to.
So thank you. I think this is a good background document. It's not what I was looking for in terms of this is the action, this is where we are concretely. And I think that, just to give some examples, the non-public school, you could say instead of in progress, you could say interviews with applicants were held on whatever date. So second tier review, how many contracts went through the review, how many contracts were sent back. I'm really glad you lifted up the uniform practice and how much regulations are needed. I want to say that I don't think this huge amount of centralization would be so needed if you had a requirement that the person initiating the contract took action before initiating the contract to try to get the work done in-house and needed to give you one sentence and the board one sentence. What did they do? If they don't provide that, you send the contract back. Maybe they weren't successful, but they need to make an effort and think about it first. With the supplies and things that you buy, we've been hearing specifically about printers and those types of contracts. Have those been consolidated? Where is that? How many of them? How many sites now have been consolidated? That's the kind of progress that I'm looking for. So that would be under centralized procurement in a specialized way. I didn't know that the fleet belonged to OUSD. I thought the Zoom fleet was contracted, like that belonged to Zoom. So I'm very confused by what that refers to. Something that is missing from here entirely are things related to utilities, such as the elevator phones and solar, and some of the other things that I know the facilities department has been working on and that were included in this year's plan. They were included for many years. They didn't maybe happen, but I'd love to know that those have happened or where they are. So that's where I'll stop for now. I have quite a bit to say about special ed, but
We'll do a second
Yeah.
round because it's a
Okay.
lot of items that we're
Yeah.
going through. So I just was like, I know that there's because there's only two of you here. I think I know I could see you both having questions on what we were talking about. So I figured for the sake of ease, we should talk about those three hot topics together before we move further down. So Cynthia, yeah, I know you signed up. I saw your right. Yes, Mr. Seychow's confirming.
How to do such an important reframing in whatever minutes are up. This is really hard. So when I read the district needs to review the program, speaking about special ed programs, to understand and share the impact of the contribution. Even the word contribution, we used to talk about encroachment, but it's weird to talk about contributing from general fund to something else when students who are part of special ed programs generate all types of dollars. So you allegedly could use all types of dollars to construct the special ed budget. So when you are budgeting for a program, be it English learner program or foster youth program, even though it's designated for a particular type of student, the discourse of contributing to something that is a part of your district's program is weird. So the whole discourse of contribution to me is really hard. It's a budgeting term of moving things from one fund to the other, but that's not how it functions in the public imagination. it functions as if students who benefit from special ed programs should be solely budgeted with special ed dollars, which is not the case. We construct the program out of whatever dollars we have available. And the other part is when we speak about 1/3 of the base funding where only 17% of enrolled students are supported by special ed programs. We don't say the other part out loud, which is they generate supplemental. To what degree do they participate? They generate concentration. To what degree do they participate? We don't talk about those percentages. And we practically, not just anecdotally, but factually know that they're not. So we could be saying the reverse. Even though they're 17% of our students, they only benefit from 1% of our supplemental investments, or 2% of our concentration, or whatever of Title I or Title III or Measure N or whatever Measure H. So the way we're framing is almost like we're being excessive in our contribution, when, contribution in big quotes, when what special ed does is so unique in that it supplants for a lot of the other things that we budget for. It completely supplants. So what it functions as is budgetary segregation. We say this service, which is usually sometimes a very base service, you have a teacher in a room with some materials. If you're lucky, you have the right number of aides. And that's it. But it functions in imagination and in practice as a segregated budgeting practice that we don't do for any other student. So we don't say because that's the foster youth budget because it happens to fund the foster youth program. It's a separate fund. We don't say that's the English learner budget because it happens to serve English learners and now that's a separate fund and we're contributing to it. So the way in which our language is so segregated and our practice of talking about contribution and percentages hides what students don't participate in is profoundly problematic. So let's just talk about budgeting for whatever the things we call special ed, which might be less than what other students get. Let's just build a budget and not emphasize so much the contribution perception because we have all kinds of resources. It's how we decide to deploy them. So, and the percentages here are making people feel like we're being excessive when we're not. We're not talking about how they're not participating in so many other funding sources in our district. So, big reframes. I'm going to be more vocal with others next year. This is really like psychological segregation and institutionalized ableism. So, thank you so much for your time.
No, it's
It's okay.
yeah.
So, Cynthia said it much better than I would have, and she's absolutely right. I wouldn't be surprised if you went back over the whole budget and looked at the increase over time in supplemental and concentration funds if SPED has been, pretty much in lockstep with that. I wouldn't be surprised. I think the finding out at the end of the year you have overspent your budget is a different problem, and it's something that probably exists throughout the district. There are some reasons that happen in the middle of the year where kids just need services and they need to be provided, and also there should be a process so that it's not a surprise to the fiscal team. One of the things that was lifted up in my looking at these, and by the way, if just to use the word of contribution for a minute, there's also something called maintenance of effort, which is that overall special education funds spent on the education piece of it can't be less the next year. Our contract with OEA, because so many special ed teachers are members of OEA will take care of that part. The additional specialized funding may help reduce the general fund portion of it, but the overall expenditure on the education has to be the same. I've learned a few things about the contractors who, by the way, some of those 5,000s are because we hire people who often work in special education, like speech therapists and behavior and analysts and social workers. We hire them to work with general ed students. And what I learned is that every different position is coded separately. So we have one agency which has something like 157 different payments. And I think that that is something that I would hope would be a negotiable factor in terms of reducing the burden on our accounting and fiscal staff. I'm hopeful. We've got many more applicants for direct hire speech therapists this year than in the past. I'm hopeful the same will happen with psychologists. And now OEA is a partner in that work. And also, I think the message has been received, and it will lead to more stable staff, less recruitment over time, less professional development needed for, basics, and a better education for the kids, because the new person won't be looking for the stapler all the time.
I think we have, 5 more items on the list that you had, Ms. Gertz, so we'll go over those, and then we'll do another round of public comment. Yeah.
Okay.
Before you start, I do want to say, you really made me think about how we, I want to say, why is it a separate category in our budget? When you're right, I started to think about English language learners and foster youth. And again, I think it does continue that perception that somehow it goes back to the encroachment word. And I think people often feel like, well, these kids are getting more than their fair share. And I think, again, when the expenditures go over, that also the encroachment word comes up. And I think, again, if we're looking at the needs of our students as needs of any group of our students go up, we wouldn't say, oh my God, this went over, but we do with it. So I think, again, it's looking at that budget as kind of, your values. So they made me think about that. So thank you, Cynthia.
Right. I know we have how many more? I'm sorry. 4 or 5, but
I think it's 5, yeah.
5. If it's okay, Dr. Frutos was on, and he wanted to actually jump in on the conversation. And this is a great group, and we all are seeking the same. It's just talking about it and learning from each other. Okay, Dr. Frutos.
Good evening. Good evening, board directors, and I really appreciated our 2 speakers regarding special education. I just wanted to very briefly mention something that our speakers also know. The way special education is funding, and the reason why the term, which by the way, it is a term that is used budgetarily and legally, the meaning of the contribution is that district special education program is funded in a deficit. That's not the case with other programs. So I wanted to just explain the dedicated revenue for special education for a school district like Oakland includes the federal IDA funding, state AB 602 funding, state mental health, preschool, what else do we have? Low incidence, Medi-Cal reimbursements, and in some cases, when there are partnerships, contributions from services that we might provide students from other districts, et cetera. As opposed to other programs that are required to basically operate within the funding that you receive, and we have to account for them that way. With special education, there is one significant challenge, and that's that the federal government has underfunded the program from the inception program. That is a little bit different than the way other programs work, think Title I. So I agree with the speaker saying that why do we treat these students differently? And I think that that's something that we should all fight against. The federal government has chosen to underfund this program so severely that I remember one time we had a group of us in California join forces with a lot of states and go to Washington to try to figure out how IDEA funding could be increased. And quite frankly, it never passed. It continued to be 20% or less, some cases a little more. And every time, as you know, there's an annual reauthorization, the increases do not continue proportionally, even to other programs. For a while, Title IX was getting significant increases, Title I, but not IDEA. So I think an important element is that we're all on the same side on this particular program. The contribution is real. That's a legal term that is used, and in our district is well over $100 million. The district has been funding it and providing wonderful programs like most districts have, by the way. This is not a criticism of other districts. It's simply an acknowledgement that most districts try to provide the best programs. I do believe that an effort to try to get eventually the federal government to at least provide a fair share of funding is something that we should continue to discuss. Now, why do we use some of the terminology we use? Well, first of all, it's terminology that's part of the fiscal reports that have to be done. The contribution to restricted programs, nobody invented in Oakland or in any other district. It's in the SACS form. That's the term that is used. The other piece is that the special education program has mandates that other programs don't have. As all of we know, if you have an IEP and there's an agreed upon service, that literally becomes a binding program. Whereas other programs, whether we're talking bilingual education, a special support, there is flexibility and adjustment that sometimes some programs don't provide. And the final thing that I wanted to mention is that in the last year, I was looking at the budgets. I just did a historical analysis, so I wanted to say that of the contribution that the district has had, which this year is around $140 million. This is something that has grown significantly in the last few years. So a question that would be it would be important to ask our program folks, and again, our speakers were talking about the programmatic piece, is that spike in cost increases, I believe, is because the contracting has expanded. So I think we're all in agreement that trying to bring some of that work to the district, and as the budgets are developed for next year, is not simply reducing contracting, but maybe benefiting from partnerships and a variety of other ideas that districts use in an effort to increase or maintain program, but not increase the cost at the level that it's going in Oakland. Somebody mentioned maintenance of effort. That's something that has to be kept in mind. Again, it's part of the budget process. Once you increase the cost, it is very difficult to decrease it. It is possible, but there has to be a justification and an analysis done. So most of the time, MOE, maintenance of effort, means the ongoing costing and increase for a particular service, like special ed. So I just wanted to mention that to put it in perspective as we look in the next few months. As you know, also, the federal government operates in a different timeline than the state. By July 1, we have to be done. Any agency that's affiliated with the state, the feds continue working, and most of the time their authorizations come around September, October. So once again, we will see this year what the administration is doing with IDEA funding and some of the other funding that can help with some of those programs. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that it's commonly known, but sometimes we forget that some of this terminology is in our reports and that some of the funding challenges are not just in one district, but they stem from the low funding levels. Thank you for letting me participate.
Can I just add something, Dr. Frutos? I understand there's a budgetary language that goes with these things. But I guess where I start to struggle with kind of the ethical piece of it, or the moral piece of it, I don't know what you want to say, is that when I look at what disabled students have had to fight to get, say for example, our Pathways program. So I feel like what happens when we look at disabled students in that one budget category, and we look at those different terms, we neglect to see the piece that says students and their families also have to fight for their, that the piece that they're entitled to as students in the district with some of our other programs that fund general education. So Pathways is an example of it. And our participation, the participation of disabled students in A to G, other things that we fund, this becomes the separate funding, and disabled students have to fight, are not always seen as entitled to those funds that all students are entitled to. If that makes sense. And I mean, it doesn't make sense. But I mean,
Absolutely, President Brohart. The only comment that I can make is that you're absolutely right. And I'll use Oakland as an example. The funding that the district has done for all special needs is actually having grown, has been met, and it continues to be funded. As the board well knows, the challenge that we have had in the district hasn't been an interest in funding those programs. I don't think, at least I haven't seen in the almost 10 years of budgeting that I reviewed, that there's been a concerted effort from the district to reduce the funding. Not that it would be possible in some cases, but not even an effort. What has happened is that the unrestricted side of the budget, the general fund, hasn't received the increases from all the granting programs from the state government, federal government, and it continues to decline. So the choice that the Board of Education has and the board of directors is obviously based on the totality of the funds. And what has happened is there hasn't been enough money to fund everything. So that moves us then from simple budgeting to priority budgeting, which is part of the discussion that has been had. As we go into next year, for example, and now that we've received economic indicators for 27, 28, the next 2 years will be different because we continue to have a deficit a lot lower than what we had before, thanks to all these strategies. But we continue to have a deficit, and as programs, let's say the special need programs continue to increase in cost, if we are not able to significantly manage the cost through the reductions of contracts and consultants, et cetera, some decisions will have to be made because, again, the funding side, the unrestricted side, is the one that is providing that funding to make sure that those programs are maintained. And it doesn't look, at least for the next 2 years, that we're going to have significant increases. We know we have a very strong COLA, at least coming year at 4.31, but the following year, the best that is looking like now with the implicit price deflator and the economic growth numbers is 3%.
Thank you, Dr. Frutos. We're going to, since we're running a little bit long on this piece, I'm going to hand it back to Ms. Gard, but thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move to the materials and services. I heard Ms. Stelton talk about, I believe the question, I'm sorry, I'm just getting my mind back to, was whether or not, this has come up quite a bit in all of the plans. And where are we? Have we centralized printers? Have we, done that work? I can say that it has been worked on, but it's been worked on, but it hasn't been completed, And so we have to pick it back up. And I'm coming into it to find out where it was. But I know that there was, when we moved at least into this isn't going to be helpful. When we moved into the Marcus Foster building, I know that some of that there, like a lot of departments had their own printers and things, and that I know that work was done where it was pared down. for central office, but at schools, you know, and just figuring out. And I do believe that, from what I'm understanding, we do down the different contractors for the printers, especially, but it's still work that wasn't fully completed. Getting to that. And then for fleet management, I'll just briefly, and this probably be good for Kim Rainey to come maybe to a board meeting starting up the next year. The Zoom buses, you're right. I mean, we pay, they'll go back to them in another 15 or some years. And Kim's be better to explain it. We pay for them, but then they'll go back at the end of their life. Yeah, you can look at it in that way. But we also have some of the work that Kim is wanting to do is we have cars and other vehicles in the district. So like getting that all pulled together and managing it well, and she's the best person to be able to do it. So that's where that work is lying. And also I hear the point that was raised that instead of saying in progress and not started, what's the actual detail of it? So we'll bring that back to another time. I haven't gotten an update on the RRMA expenditures, so I don't want to go into it because I would be just saying something that I don't feel like I'm ready to say. What is not here is the TK hubs. So we do have an update on TK hubs. Hold on one second. Get that quickly. So for the TK implementation, we are starting both at Carl Monk and Fruitvale. That's underway. According to enrollment, the enrollment looks strong for both. Teacher hiring is in progress. We have a large number of applicants according to, this update was provided from Jessica Cannon, so I thank her for doing that. They have a large candidates, and we are also close to the completion of hiring the TK paras, because that was, we were concerned about that being able to happen. Facilities upgrades, including the yard improvements, are scheduled and planned. Furniture has been ordered, and ECE is supporting, so early childhood is supporting both principals at the sites. So there has been a lot of work, and that I think is something that we could really celebrate as we continue on the TK hub planning. And the last update I think that I would give tonight, which, well, we've talked a lot about it and is the use of restricted dollars first. And before it said shift attendance specialist and noon supervisors. I don't know if you recall where we started. We actually just said shift attendance and noon supervisors to SNC, shift cost of small schools to SNC. That did happen. And you can see on here, those are the targeted amounts. We'll provide on June 24th what the actual amounts were for those shifts. But also, this is a lot of the work happened in this using restricted dollars first, which we had that in previous plans, but it's been the help with Dr. Frutos particularly that's helped us really looking at the expenditures, reclassifications, and just thinking about how, we have so much dollars that are sitting in restricted, and it would to go insolvent because of our unrestricted and still carry all of the restricted dollars doesn't make sense. So just figuring out how to do that, but how to do it in a way that is not harming students has been the mindset, and that's work that will just continue. Stop there. There's other questions.
We'll do board questions and comments, and then do another round of public comment. Oh, you're okay. I have two questions.
Yes.
The first is on the, and I know you didn't give a specific update on the reductions to central, but I did just want to,
Oh.
when I was looking through the I think of thinking of it like the green box, the sum up piece
Yes.
about what the recommendation to continue in 26, 27, it just mentions in here that the work to actually reorganize the central office and reorganize the divisions is going to come, it says no later than October 1st, and then goes on to say that it will be reported quarterly, I assume, going forward from October 1st. Is that, because I know there's been a lot of questions about, we're making all these reductions in central, but we haven't really done, we didn't exactly do that with here's where we're going. So is that kind of what you're referencing in that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We haven't, yes, where are we going? We've asked for reorgs in central forever and a day, and there are times where we have, and then we've had to bring some things back. There's times where we've not made all of the reductions that we thought. And also, it's really hard. I mean, I'll give an example. In talent, we eliminated, but then where we also were reducing cost. So we had some positions that were new that cost less, but then it looked like we went up, right? But the cost, because it was about the cost, like we needed the people and we had some work. So what I guess I'm trying to say is to really understand what's happening in Central. You can't just look at, oh, well, they have more people, because sometimes that might be true, but we still might have found a way to bring the cost down in order to get the work done also. So it's, I noticed when I was putting this in and looking back at the old plans, and it'd say, yes, we did this. Yes, we did this. We did, but it does seem like we're still in the same, we still are saying the same things. So there just needs to be some work on talking about really what is in central office, really, and also how are we defining it, and what are you actually asking? Because I understand when I say that. Like, for example, special education is central, right? Custodial is central. So when we're looking to reorg, I don't think you're really talking about that. So, like, we need to just get to the nitty-gritty of it, really, and look at how our departments are working together.
So I think for me, what I'm looking at in Central is how do these positions support the work at the sites? And that's staff, so if you're saying we hired people in talent at a lower salary to get people onboarded faster, whatever that is, that to me is a legitimate position. I mean, obviously that's been we need more people to do the same thing, I think, in some ways with payroll. But I guess what isn't always clear about Central is kind of what is Central. I mean, and these different, so it's not, to me, it's not just like cutting positions, it's really linking that through line between the support that sites need from Central, and are we able to provide that with what we have, that make sense?
It does. And
So, yeah, I mean, okay.
And central office is to support schools, students, families, and also for compliance, right? And where people may not feel like it's a support. But so all of those like core functions, yes, it does.
I just have one other quick comment before we go to public comment, which is that I think that I have been, kind of a parent in the district for, for not, for like 10 years or something, and have been following the budget, but obviously I've only been on the board a short time. But I just, I do want to say that it has been really, while I do share, I think, some of the public's requests that there's more detail for some of what's the specific work that we've done and some of the specific numbers that we've saved. I just want to say that it's very refreshing to have this level of specificity, even though, again, I think I would push us to do a little bit more, but that in, like when my experience with attachment C, let's just say, we did not get this level of detail about what had happened. And I just want to also appreciate, I know Ryan and yourself and the fiscal team and Dr. Frutos have worked on this quite a bit. So I just did want to take a moment to say, to just appreciate it. And I think one thing we can do is think about what would be the format to, whether it's updating this chart or whether it's the, similar to how you did in the attachment A, B, and C attachment, whether it's that maybe with like another column, but and I think we could bring it back again in the August meeting. That, we can talk about that, but.
Yes. And I want to also thank our general counsel because she has this would not be getting this done without her too. So just want to name that.
Thank you, General Counsel Lindsay. Thank you. So we'll do one more round of public comment, 3 minutes each. Since there's only two of you, if you just want to approach the mic.
Good evening, Carol Delton. I thought of a few other things that were not included on the list that have been lifted up as part of strategies. Enrollment and attendance was one, although the TKs are part of that. Saturday school is another, and this might be a situation where what you report is Saturday school operates at this, and this sites, or something that wasn't feasible. One of the things that has come up in discussions around contracting is the frustration of applicants in the timeliness of district response. So with the one-time grants that are coming in, it might be a good time to look at the application process. Is it as up to date as possible in terms of providing the applicant with an easy portal? That doesn't mean more staff. That doesn't mean more ongoing expenses except for the license to keep the contract for the software, but so the person can check themselves and then, kind of take some of the troubleshooting into their hands, because we have lost people who otherwise, what the contractors offer is a quick hire. They don't necessarily offer better working conditions. They certainly don't offer better benefits, but they offer a quick hire. And when you're coming out of school and you have debts, or you just moved to the state and you need income, or you really wanted to leave that job that is, a really long commute, but you have to have something to go to. So I would say, especially for psychologists and speech therapists who always have offers, that is critical. I would like to say that while I appreciate, and I hope Dr. Frutos is listening, Dr. Frutos, I appreciate so much the support you have given our fiscal team and many things that you have done. And I think what tonight shows is that the fiscal team is doing fine. And much of what you said tonight was very much repetition for all of the people in the room. And I just hope that everybody can acknowledge what a wonderful job Ms. Gard and Mr. Nguyen and Ms. Lindsay are doing to move our district forward with your help in the background. But we really appreciate hearing from our own staff at these meetings.
Hello. Today I'm operating, just know I'm Cynthia Molina, who supports everybody in understanding budgets and our whole process and how we're even structured, which is quite a monumental charge. But today I'm coming in because I was listening to the presentation yesterday, and I had some concerns about the framing of our special education budgeting piece. So, and that's more as a parent and as an individual stakeholder. It doesn't mean I don't have opinions about a lot of things that are being discussed. But I will add to my previous comments that I want to encourage everyone to look at the folder for the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education and to look at the presentation for October of 2025, where we asked our special ed director to explain changes in different budget lines of what we call SPED, whether that be paraeducators or teachers, classroom teachers or whatever, and to contracted things and to explain the drivers for costs. And we went through each one. And in many instances, even when there weren't changes in the full-time equivalency or positions of a particular investment, just a raise in 25% raise in the benefits or the win in the paraeducator contract or the OEA contract, she demonstrated year by year what that meant in millions of dollars. But when we elevate it all together into one figure, we don't get to see that. So people don't understand that just raising those basic things raises the special ed costs and the related quote, quote, contribution. So I do want to encourage everybody to look at that presentation. It's very educational, October 2025 CAC meeting. And with that, I would love for this board to meet as a SELPA board. Let's please meet as a SELPA board. We cannot understand specific programs or specific investments if we don't unpack them. So even if it's a quarterly meeting, let's separate out everything that we call quote, quote, SPED. Let's start with our base program. That student who only gets a teacher in a classroom at 3 grade levels, and that's it. And let's unpack the costs of the things we call SPED. So I really want to encourage that for all of us, or we're going to be here with me 10 years older saying the same thing again. So we have to treat it like all the other things we line item in our district, and people have to understand them. And Dr. Fruto said that we have more flexibility with other dedicated funding. That's not to the benefit necessarily of things. We have students who don't get designated English language development, even though we have funds for it and it's a mandated service. We just don't go after the recording of whether they're getting it, and we don't do like speech therapists do, where you have your log of minutes and you can prove that students got those services. And that's a pain point for the English Learners Committee. And maybe it should be like an IEP when you write down the 30 minutes. And it actually is in the IEPs that you have to give English learners with IEPs their designated minutes for English language development, and there's a lot of gaps there. In some cases, it's 0 kids getting them, those minutes. So yeah, I do want that for us, and it will help us understand what's just supplanting, and we just have to understand that our any student generates a multitude of different types of funding streams and whether they're benefiting or not. And in the case of special ed, which is largely supplanting their participation in many things, it might be justifiable that those percentages are the way they look. So thank you for that. And I do want to say, as a person I'm looking forward to a coherent district description in the future, as a person whose role has existed in state and federal, in communications, in the Office of Equity, in community engagements in community schools and student services, and been moved around historically. And we need to understand where our core functions are, that so when we say the name of a department, we know what the department does, you know, so I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, and that wraps up our last item. We'll move now to public comment on all non-agenda items. So I think, do we have speakers signed up, Mr.
Yes,
Singleton?
we have one registered speaker, Carol Delton.
3 minutes.
Thank you. I want to, in the course of my looking at various documents to prepare for the NPS committee, I ran across some issues that I wanted to lift up because ultimately they impact the district budget. So one is the status of what used to be Community Day, which I did not think was a good deal at the time, but it's not owned by OUSD. It's on a long-term lease. I believe it was 50 years at the start, and of course it's less than that now. So I think we need to be very careful. I don't know how that became the place where I believe it's the district servers were placed, but I don't think we should be investing in property that we don't own. And if it comes to the point where those servers have spent their life, have worked through their life existence, then I think the next generation should be moved to property that OUSD owns, and there should be a determination if giving that property back to the city is the best fiscal decision, because OUSD is so awash in empty property at this point. I'm very concerned about what's going to happen with the old Berkeley Maynard site and the Prop 51 lease. Even if a charter school moves in now and takes that over, you know, that is a liability for decades to come. So it's a worry that I have. And, you know, to all the people who are saying close schools and save money because you won't be operating so many sites, my question is, what are you going to do with the sites? And what, you know, make OUSD an offer on some of the empty sites now. So that's one area of concern that I have. Another area of concern that I have, and I don't want to go into extraordinary detail, but our colleagues in Contra Costa County have been researching non-public agencies. And I don't know if this applies to the non-public agencies that OUSD contracts with, but some of them are private equity funded. What that means is that the beneficiary is not just the student or the owner or the provider, but ultimately the shareholders. And I'm very concerned about that becoming a potential model that is essentially taking advantage of the need of special education students for specialized services and the need to provide them. So I wanted to lift that up as just something to look at, because some of these specialized services are just expensive because they take a lot to provide them. The students should get the benefit of them, not the shareholders.
You can go ahead and approach the mic.
I just want to share appreciations. So I typically every year when the advisory committees give their feedback for the LCAP, I stand up and do this kind of overarching, how did the year go, what was the process, and I will not be doing that when they come up next week in the same way. But I wanted to take this moment because you are here. Some of the people that I would have spoken about, you know, I just want to thank you directly. It's going to be an abbreviated feedback statement, and they can carry the message of the process. I don't need to do it myself. But just to say that I am personally, as a staff, very grateful for, regardless of the challenges of this year with our budget and the reductions, for the level of engagement with our parent stakeholders and other stakeholders. It has been unique. It has been unique in that I've never experienced a superintendent that attended every single meeting of the most integrating committee in our district before, that there is never been a liaison to the CAC that has been this active. And maybe I'll say it as a personal comment, but not in that segment, you know, and that they feel it and appreciate it deeply, and the depth of knowledge and experience. Same with your liaison work with the Parent-Student Advisory Committee, which is commendable, and thank you for that. The efforts to make room for their voices, you know, in meetings, despite all the pressures, are amazing. Appreciating Ms. Gard for putting messages of support in her own newsletters and meeting privately to haggle things with Ms. Lindsay as well. That level of direct engagement is rare and should be pretty, you know, common. So just in general, this has been, despite all the challenge, the most gratifying year for me in my role in terms of the staff support that I have received and the leadership support. So I hope you go home feeling that. Maybe I'll write it as an e-comment or something, but yeah. Or maybe I'll do my 1 minute in the big meeting. So, but it matters. I've been here 21 years, and this has never been easy, but this matters. So thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to introduction of new legislative matters. Director Bruhart, okay. And with that, we are adjourned.